Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Beth Rose Onion. I'm part of the You Choose the Next Newbery committee, and we're waiting on our author, Allie Benjamin, and we're putting in a call to her right now. So I hope that you can all wait patiently. I do want to thank you all. I got lots of really great questions from you all. And I'm hoping that she has some really great answers for us as well. So we'll just hang out quietly until we hear from her. So thanks. Sorry.
Beth, you want anything good you're reading?
Oh my gosh, I'm reading so many great things. I'm just trying to think. The nice thing about my job is that I get copies of books way ahead of everybody else. So I'm just trying to think of some things that I've read. Actually, right now, I also work with teens. And so I was getting a lot of recommendations for teen books.
And Allie's here.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Allie. Okay. So we're so glad that you're here. And
thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to start our whole introduction and then we will get started. We have lots of questions. So again, my name's Beth Rose Anya, and I'm a member of the You Choose the Next Newbery committee. And our committee is so lucky. We get to every year at King County Library System, what we do is we get lots and lots and lots of books, and we read. And then in the fall, what we do is we put together a short list of books that we think are Newbery contenders. So, and we welcome students from all over our area to have book discussions after they've read the books and then vote on their favorite book. And one of the books that made our top 5 list this year is The Thing About Jellyfish by Allie Benjamin, and we're happy to be able to hang out with her this morning. This is Allie's first novel and first book for young readers, and it's about Susie Swanson and the death of her one-time best friend, whose name is Franny Jackson, and the way that she's dealing with what happened to them. So, and also The Thing About Jellyfish was a finalist for the National Book Award, which I think is very, very cool. So, good morning, Allie. How are you doing?
Great.
Excellent. Okay, have you ever done one of these before?
I have not.
Okay.
No,
so this is we're going to have fun. We have got loads of questions for you from all of our local students and from the librarians. In fact, I just checked my email and I got a couple more, and I had like a whole list this morning at 7 o'clock. So we better get started. Are you ready?
Ready. I am so ready.
Okay. So the first question is, when did you decide to be an author, and did anyone or anything inspire you?
Wow, that is a really good question. So it took me a very long time to realize that I was interested in being an author. I always thought that being a writer was something that other people did, that it was that somehow you were born a writer, and some people had this special pass, and nobody had ever given me this special pass, so I just assumed that that door was closed to me. And then a couple of years ago, I met a young woman who was really, really interesting, who had a great story. She was born HIV positive, and she was bullied very badly as a result. And she emerged a lot stronger from the bullying, and she became a national anti-bullying advocate and an HIV educator. And I thought, this is a really interesting story, and this is a story that we don't see very often, where somebody is bullied and they emerge stronger as a result. And I just thought this should be a book, like this should be something. And so without, we didn't really have any connections in the publishing world, but I thought, let's try it, because this is an important story, and I thought it was an important enough story that it was worth trying. And we wrote this book together, and then we sold it, and it had this life out in the world. And that was it was surprising to me and interesting to me. And then I thought, well, maybe I can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever been or wanted to be anything except a writer?
Oh, yes. Well, okay. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the New York City suburbs, and what I wanted to be then, I was a New York Yankee.
Oh.
Now, I didn't play baseball. I didn't play Little League. I actually asked my parents if I could, but my family was a very non-sporty family, and they just kind of scratched their heads and went, huh. And then since then, I've wanted to be lots and lots of different things. And I've had I've done a bunch of different things. I've worked in business. I've worked in healthcare. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa. I've worked for nonprofits. And actually, I think all of these things have made me a writer in a way, because I get to have all these different, I've had all these different experiences, and I've gotten to know lots of different kinds of people who do lots of different kinds of things. And in a way, all of those are stories.
They
Does
all
that make sense?
contribute to it, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Can you share more about your background and how it helped you write about jellyfish?
So one of the things in all these different jobs I had, I always wound up being the person who figured out how to, when something needed to be written down, when something needed messaging, I was always the one to do it. And it's interesting, one of my first jobs in New York City, I was working in medical communications. It was this business kind of like advertising, but all focused on healthcare stuff. And I had taken on a project there, and they'd never had any brochures about the company before. And I was like, well, I can try to create something. I was young, I was pretty fresh out of college, and they had this system set up. So I tried writing something. I talked to a lot of different people. I put something together. I was very proud. And they had this system where you could send it out to a lot of people. It was like Google Docs, where you could send it out to a lot of people at once, and they could comment on it, and everybody could see the comments that were made all at once. And the first person to comment was the president of the company, and he commented with just 2 words. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but the 2 words were "this SUCKS." And that was the only thing he said about it. And actually, in a weird way, that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because when you're a writer, you get a lot of criticism, and a lot of people give you feedback. And in a way, like, I've ever gotten was worse than that 2-word criticism from the president of the company. And I just think the more that you do, and the more that you try, the better you get at sort of, I don't know, hearing people and hearing messages and listening to criticism and trying to do better.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, so did you ever get tired of writing? And how many times did you rewrite your book? And like, who's your illustrator? They want to know things about the book.
Okay. So did I ever get tired of writing? Yes. And that is actually one of the biggest things that I would say to anybody who wants to be a writer is, you're going to get to the point where you think this is terrible, or I don't want to do this anymore, and what's the purpose, and is this ever going to go anywhere? And I had a lot of moments like that. I probably rewrote it. I mean, I probably was on the 7th draft by the time we sent it to publishers. And once I was working with an editor at Little Brown, we probably did it at least 4 more times. Now, each time it was getting more and more refined, and it wasn't, at the beginning it was a very different kind of story. And then, I figured out what the story was, but I was sort of rewriting sort of who some of the characters were. And it gets a little closer every time, but yeah, it's a lot of drafts.
Yeah.
And if you haven't gotten to the point with a manuscript where you hate it and you just want to tear the whole thing apart, I don't know. Like, every writer I know gets to that point. Okay. So, yes.
Okay. Good to know. Are the characters in the thing about jellyfish based on your friends or family?
Oh, that's such a good question. So the inspiration for the book was, I have 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old now and a 9-year-old. And the 9-year-old, from the time she was a baby, just was crazy about sea creatures. I myself had never thought that much about sea creatures. I had never really, you go to the ocean and you see the surface of the water. You don't see what's underneath. I never spent a whole lot of time thinking about what was underneath. And she just, she would see a fish, if we went into a pet store and they just have like tanks of fish, she would quiver with excitement. And, and so one day, when she was a little older, she had a day off from school. Both the girls had a day off from school, and we went to the New England Aquarium, and we spent the day at the New England Aquarium, and we wandered really quite accidentally into the jellyfish exhibit. It's exactly how the book starts off with Susie Swanson standing in the aquarium and kind of wandering down to the jellyfish exhibit. And that's what happened with us. And we were, that was the moment where I first really started to think, wow, all of these creatures are out there and they exist and they're fascinating. So to some degree, and so my younger daughter who loves fish and ocean life is also, she's an introvert. She is very quiet. She likes spending time by herself. She doesn't need to be in big groups of people. So it's a little bit based on her. She would be, but she and Susie are quite different. And some of the things that Susie does in the book are things that she would never do. And then my older daughter is very extroverted and just fearless. And she would not hesitate to travel across the world if that's what she needed to do. And so I had that in mind too as I was writing it. And then some of it, you know, I remember distinctly, I remember so clearly what it was like to enter middle school. And I was a different kid from Susie, and yet middle school I found really overwhelming. And I think people who were looking at me from the outside probably thought I was handling it just fine. But it was overwhelming. It was, you know, you go from an elementary school where you have one teacher and everybody knows you, and then suddenly you're in this big school where you're moving from class to class and you've got lockers and everything's loud and everybody's changing really fast. And I remember so clearly, like it's never left me what that felt like and what a change it was.
I think it's important. I think everybody to remember that. Yeah, for sure. I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you research all the stuff about jellyfish, or did somebody just tell you the facts?
Oh my goodness. I researched. So when I started writing this book, I didn't know that I was writing a book. So we went to the aquarium that day. We looked at the jellyfish exhibit, and I really just wanted to know more. That's all it was at the beginning, is I was looking at these creatures and they're all like pulsing and they're fascinating. And to me, they looked so alien, and it was so interesting to me that they were creatures on this planet just like we are. And we occupy such different worlds, and yet we don't. And so I originally just wanted a book about jellyfish where I could learn more. And I went to the gift shop that day and I couldn't find one. And I went home and I went to a bookstore and I couldn't find one. And I went on Amazon and I couldn't, you know, I could find things that mentioned jellyfish, but there weren't really books at the time about jellyfish. There is one now, adult nonfiction book that has since come out. But at the time, I just want, then I started reading things online. I started reading articles and, you know, newspaper articles, magazine articles. And then I got here. I'm going to move you guys over to my book, if that's okay.
Okay.
I found this book. Oh, my dog might wander up. This is called The Deep. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, The Deep.
The Deep. It's this amazing book of photographs of creatures that live in the deep sea. And it's just page after page of, let me see if you can see that. Just these sort of dark photos of these incredibly creepy animals, but there are a lot of jellyfish in there. And so I started reading that. I got some marine biology textbooks, and I just started piecing together some of the things that I thought were interesting about jellyfish. And so it was really research that I found on my own. And there are a lot of researchers in the book, and they're all real people whom I had considered reaching out to say, I'm writing a book about jellyfish. But I didn't really know what I was writing. I thought, you know, like I wanted there to be a book. I couldn't find a book. I thought, well, all right, let me just start researching. And then I started writing. And I thought about reaching out to all these different people, but I didn't know what I would tell them. I didn't know what kind of book I was writing, if it was even going to be a book. So I just kind of track them online, kind of the way Susie does in the book. And then I wrote the book, and then I sold the book, and some of these researchers, that none of them knew that they were going to be in this book. So it was only after we had sort of an advanced reader copy that Jamie Seymour, who's a researcher that she sort of locks onto in the book, I sent him a copy and was like, surprise! I'm like,
This is okay.
and he was absolutely wonderful. He was so warm and so enthusiastic, and that was great.
That was actually one of my later questions from one of the kids. They wanted to know if these were real researchers or if you had made them up. So that's good. Yay. All right.
And that,
okay.
I was just going to say that was a real, that was a difficult decision because, of course, these researchers never asked to be put in a book. And I was really on the fence about whether or not they should be real, and yet I wanted all of the jellyfish facts to be real, and I couldn't really see how I could invent some of the researchers and talk about what they do without also inventing facts, because all the facts that we know were discovered by real people, and somehow it seemed more disrespectful to not include them as real.
It's much more authentic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the next question is, what other animals besides jellyfish are you fond of?
Oh, wow. Okay, so my probably second favorite creature. All right, well, so dogs. I've got a dog sitting with me right now if anybody wants to see him.
Of course. We love dogs.
This is Molly.
Aww.
Yeah, she's with me pretty much all the time when I'm working. But so there's this have you guys ever heard of water bears?
No.
Water bears are the craziest creatures. They're these microscopic creatures that can live in all these really extreme conditions. They dry themselves out, like when they're sort of stressed or threatened. They can become almost like freeze-dried coffee. And they're in this suspended animation while they're totally, like, they can go to 1% of their normal moisture. And then as soon as you add moisture, they spring back to life. And they've been found in the ocean. They've been found in the Himalayas. They were sent into the vacuum of space, and they survived the vacuum of space. And they're also kind of adorable. They look a little bit like gummy bears.
Okay.
You can only see them under a microscope. So water bears, I think, are pretty awesome.
Excellent. Now I'm going to have to do some research. Okay. Now they came up with some very specific questions to the story, so I'm just going to get started with those. The first one is, why did you mention Diana Nyad?
That's a very good question. So she was one of the people that I came across when I was researching, and I was aware of her, but I would say because she had so many specific experiences with really terrible jellyfish stings. For decades, she was trying to make this diva to Florida sting or swim, and she kept getting stung by jellyfish, and she kept trying anyway. And I felt like she embodied this sort of almost battle between like the forces of nature and human determination. And so I thought that was interesting. And I also, I felt like what she did was a real victory. And I felt like the book needed a real victory. Even if Susie doesn't get everything she wants, even if ultimately the thing she's trying to do is something that she can't really do, I wanted there to be almost a surrogate victory in there for her, something that could show that kind of human achievement and determination, and, you know, almost show Susie that even if it's not all going to work out right now, someday keep trying, and things are going to work out. If that
makes
a symbol.
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. The next question is, why was Susie so shy and quiet?
So it's a great question, and it's got to do both with characters and how characters come to a writer, but also with literary choices. There are some things that when you start to write about a character, or you're writing a character, you're writing as a character, there are some things that you just know. And I just knew that she was incredibly quiet. I decided pretty early on, and it wasn't even a decision, it kind of just came to me that she had stopped talking. And I don't know, somehow I just knew that she was so shut down by what had happened. She needed time and space to process it, and that had made her quiet. I also, the more I worked with that, the more I liked that as a literary choice, as a writer's choice, because in a way, throughout most of the book, she's not talking to anyone except for one person. She's telling Franny the story of their friendship and what happened between them. And so the more I worked with it, the more I really liked that she was talking to somebody, but nobody knew it. She was talking to her friend who isn't there anymore.
Right. Did you ever know somebody who had shut down and hadn't talked for a long time and then all of a sudden just started talking again?
No, but it's interesting because since I've written the book, a number of people have told me about people in their lives. And one woman, who's the most outgoing woman in the world, told me that she herself had done something similar when she was in high school. It's called selective mutism, where you just decide, where it's a decision, it's a conscious decision not to talk. And I was so stunned by this woman because she's so outgoing and so social. And when she told me that she herself had done it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so it's actually, I didn't realize, I wouldn't know the numbers on how common it is, but it's not unheard of, because now I've talked to all of these people that have seen it happen or who have done it.
Okay, that's good to know. The next question is, have you ever been stung by a jellyfish?
I have not been stung by a jellyfish, and part of that is I am a giant baby, and I can remember being at the beach when I was a kid, and if I even heard there was jellyfish in the water, I would panic and sort of freeze and get out of the water. And you know, if I was in the water, there's some people who can relax around jellyfish, and I just wasn't that kid. And since then I've learned, like, there are certain jellyfish, only certain jellyfish that you can touch, in the South. My mother-in-law lives in the South, and there are these, they're called cannonball jellyfish, and they're about that big, and they're very firm. They're almost like balls that wash up onto the shore. They can't hurt you, and I know that, so now I've touched them and picked them up. But no, I have not. But so many people have. I do these school visits sometimes, and I often will ask kids in the room, like, how many here know somebody who's been stung by a jellyfish? And almost every hand goes up, and I say, how many people have been stung by a jellyfish? And a ton of hands are up. It's really, really common.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I only look at them in the tanks. That's as close as I get. But they're beautiful, beautiful. All right. The next question is, why did you make the chapter so short?
Oh. Some of them were quite a bit longer starting off, but I wanted to be able to go back and forth between the present day action and all the stuff that had happened between Franny and Suzy. So I just, in order to go back and forth and not feel like I was losing threads, like sometimes it felt like if they were too long, you start to forget about that other stuff. And I was worried that it could be for some kids a confusing enough structure that going back and forth, and I didn't want to lose track of anything. Yeah, and then some of them just felt right short. Certainly, like the chapters about jellyfish, those felt right short. I mean, there are a couple chapters that are like a paragraph long, and those are the things that I sort of wanted to stand on their own.
That's great. Kind of touched on, because somebody else had asked, like, why did you go back and forth in time? Like, why did you make the decision to write the book like that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that was ever a specific. I just knew I wanted the reader to experience what Susie was experiencing. I wanted the reader to feel what she felt, all these different steps along the way. And there was a lot of backstory. I thought it was really important. So much of why she's struggling so much in the present, and why, you know, I mean, anytime somebody dies, that's a really hard thing. But to feel like you have unfinished business, or to feel that you did something really wrong. And some of the stuff she does is not that pretty unkind. And that's part of why she's in the place where she is. And I just wanted readers to really see all that had happened through her eyes, and to feel what she felt as she felt it.
I think that was a really wise move. Good. Okay. The next question is, why did you make Franny's character change into a diva? Their words, not mine.
I think that age there are a lot of changes, and I think people experiment with different kinds of behavior. And she has diva-like moments. It's funny, I don't think of her entirely as a diva. I think of her as somebody who wasn't entirely fulfilled by her friendship with Susie. Right. Susie only needed Franny, but Franny was a different person than Susie, and Franny needed more than Susie. And I tried to show that there were moments of her trying to include Susie, and it just wasn't going to work. And I think that's such a hard thing about friendship that age, is in the end, like, we're all trying to figure out who we are, and the friendship's got to work for everyone for it to work. So I don't know. I wanted, it was really important to me. So I remember feeling like, and somewhere here is my my middle school diary, which, by the way, is not remotely interesting. But I remember when I was in middle school, I had these very clear boundaries in my head between, you know, the people who were good and the people who were bad, and the people who were nice and the people who were mean. And now, so I've got kids, and I read over my diary, and I think that the boundaries actually aren't all that clear. We're all kind of nice, but we're also all kind of mean sometimes. And, you know, we all have it in us to be hurtful. And I can see that now in a way I couldn't then. So it was actually really important to me as I was writing it to show that, you know, I wanted the main character to do things that were wrong, because I think that's realistic. I wanted her to do things that were hurtful, and not to understand how hurtful they were. And I don't know. So why was she a diva? I mean, I don't know that she was a diva, but I think the best answer to that is she just needed more than she was going to get from Susie. And that's okay, but it's also hurtful.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Why did the frog die?
And I think that's actually, of all the things, to me, that's one of the hardest moments in the book. And it's because I have a memory that is burned in my brain of some boys. I was younger than Susie was at the time, but I was with my sister and another girl, and there were some, you know, really tough, kind of mean boys who were doing the same thing. And I remember so vividly, I was screaming for them to stop. I was screaming, and I couldn't make them stop. And like, even now thinking about it, like, I get upset. And so it was one of those things that I didn't even know was in my memory until I was writing it. And then it came out, and I was like, yes, that was an awful moment. And I would say, just from a story perspective, I already knew what Susie had done to Franny. And I knew that there needed to be some justification for that, that she had to be really, really upset.
Right.
And I was trying to wrestle with why, like, what might have gotten her that upset that she would do it. And I didn't want it to be over a boy. I didn't want it to be, typical. I thought that she would feel so fiercely protective of animals because she does love the natural world so much. It just felt right, and that memory was in there. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
So when you decide to use body fluid for the message?
When did I decide?
Yes. I told you
Ooh.
these are very specific questions.
That's a very specific question. I knew that was going to happen before I knew some of the other things that were going to happen. And in fact, that was in there before, you know, there are all those hints of it, send me a message, send me a message. And the idea of sending a message wasn't even in there. I had her doing it, and it seemed so out of the blue without the message. And so I later stitched in needing to send a message. And why body fluid? I don't know. I think I was doing a lot of thinking in the book about what makes us humans and what makes us different from animals, and where are we different and where are we not so different. And I don't know, I came upon this. When I was working on the other book about Paige Roll, the girl with HIV who had been bullied, I'd spent a lot of time in middle schools and really think she had gotten notes slipped into her locker. I'd actually spent a lot of time looking at lockers, and I don't know, I got the idea, and I was like, I think that has to be in there. But I have to say, it was in there, and when the book sold to publishers, I was like, one of my first thoughts, I thought of that scene, and I was like, did they read the whole thing? Like, did they film it?
It was brilliant, and it was stunning, and it really captured my attention.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah. Okay, the puberty stuff is so specific, and they want to know why.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
They said, why is the puberty stuff so specific in the book?
Are we talking about, there's a scene where she gets her period? Is that what we're talking about?
Maybe. They didn't give me specific examples. It was just the puberty stuff. So. Okay.
So Susie didn't want to grow up.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was all, and I think middle school is such an interesting age, because you're right at the point where some kids are growing up emotionally and physically very, very fast, and some kids aren't. And they're all for a couple years there. Everybody grows up eventually, everybody evens out, but for a couple of years, everybody's jumbled up in there together, and it feels like the differences are so huge.
Yeah.
And Susie was in that place where she didn't want to grow up. She didn't want to have hit puberty. She didn't want to, she had been fine where they were, and she wanted to stay young, and not everyone around her did. And yet you can't stay young. And that's, I think that's one of the great hardships. Like, I think it's a wonderful thing about middle school kids in general, that they have sort of all of these things going on at once. They can have these incredibly thoughtful, mature conversations. They're really thinking about the world, but they've also got this really youthful side. And I don't know, to me, sort of being on this side of things, it's that sense of having to move forward whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
I think knowing where I am, which is you know you can't ever go back. I don't know. I think it's just such an interesting time, and it was Susie is like almost like trapped on this ride where everyone's getting older and she is too, and she can't help it even if she wants to.
She can't.
That's why it's yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. All right, this is a little bit lighter. Did you actually escape to Australia?
Did I?
Yeah, did you? Have you ever escaped to Australia?
No, I would love to. I've never been to Australia. The book is now out in Australia, so I feel like that's my surrogate. The book is published there. I'd like to go there someday, though.
Me too. Yeah. Okay. Do you think that if Susie told Franny about her parents' divorce, that her character wouldn't have changed?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't think Franny and Susie, I don't think they were going to be best friends for the long term, no matter what. And I think the fact that she couldn't tell Franny about her parents' divorce is a sign that they had already started to go in opposite directions. I think it's more, the fact that she didn't tell Franny is more an effect than a cause. But maybe things wouldn't have ended as they did if she'd been able to sort of say the words out loud.
Yeah. Okay. What did you hope that readers would take away from this book?
What do I hope? So I'm going to say two things, I think. One is back to that idea that there really aren't people who are all good or all bad. And, you know, I think girls in particular, who I think that girls who are sort of different and, you know, not your typical good girl, they're also not all bad. But then the people that we often assign, you know, we say are villains aren't necessarily all bad either, divas or whatever. But then the other thing is a sense of wonder and a sense that the world around us, the universe around us, is actually a really beautiful and fascinating place, and that it holds a lot of mystery, and that can be a sign of comfort, so inspiration. You know, and then of course there's the whole, I mean, the death thing is the easy answer, but I'm not sure that it comes to any resolution on death. Like, I don't think I have any answers for that. I think people die and we don't know how to move on, and we move on anyway because we have to.
Yeah. Okay. You touched on bullying a little bit, you know, based on your other book experience. Is there any message about that that you would like to give the kids that are listening right now?
Well, I would say two things. One, everybody is fighting something hard. You know, there's that line, everybody we meet is fighting a hard battle. So be kind, and that's true, and that's real. And then I would say also, it's really easy not to notice when we ourselves are being the bully, when we ourselves are being unkind. It's much easier to notice when other people are being unkind. It's much harder. And that, like reading my middle school diary, I'm like in so many ways disappointed with my middle school self, because I thought of myself as being a really nice kid, and I thought of myself as being one of the nice kids. And then I'm reading this, and some of the stuff I say about other people is just mean. And I never would have thought that I was being a jerk at the time. But look, there I was. And so I would just say, like, be kind, and also look at your own behavior as often as you can, because all of us can be mean. I wish that weren't true.
I wish it weren't, but yeah, it's good to think about. Working on another book.
I am, and it changes a little bit by the day. It is, I'll tell you that my biggest sources of fascination right now, and I have, you know, I'm working things in and I'm taking them out, I'm absolutely fascinated by space travel, which is maybe similar to what the idea that there are these different worlds out there and they really exist. And they're real, like, you know, space, it's so theoretical, except it's real, and people go there sometimes, and we send these devices out there. I'm also really fascinated by Isaac Newton, who was a really terrible, terrible child. I mean, if all you look at is his behavior as a child, he was born into this farming family, and he was never going to be a farmer, but that's what his family needed him to be. And he was so defiant, and he would just refuse to do what they said. And his family got fined because the pigs trampled over the neighbor's grain. And he wasn't, he threatened his mother and his stepfather. He would do things to sort of upset people in this village for the sake of upsetting them. And I think it's because he was such an ill fit with the life that he was born into. And it was almost like everything in him was screaming, this isn't it. This isn't the life for me. And he had no power to do anything about it. And so I'm really fascinated by that. And so I'm sort of going back and forth between these two different manuscripts.
Okay. They also wanted to know if there would be a sequel to the thing about, or is this just a story?
Will there be a sequel? People have asked that. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't have a story for it. I'm open to ideas. If any kids have ideas, I would be open to it. I love Susie. I love her family. I love Justin. Like, I would love to work with the characters more, but I don't know what the story behind them would be. And I don't know if everybody wants to see her in a different place. Like, I don't know what that would be like for readers to get to know her. So we know her at the beginning of 7th grade as she's struggling with all of this. What's she going to be like in 8th grade or 9th? And will she be the same? She won't be the same. So I don't know how much people really would want to see it. I don't know. But I'm not opposed.
Okay, that's good to know. How do you feel when you hear that we think your book is a Newbery contender?
Well, thank you, first of all. I think the great surprise, when I was writing this book, I wasn't writing it with the idea that it would be published or that it would see all the success. I was writing it because it was something that I was really interested in, and there were things I was really wrestling with, and writing was a way to explore those things. And I was really surprised when it sold. And when I hear that people liked it, I guess I didn't really think it would have a life in the world. And I thought if it had a life, it would be a really small life, because in the end, it's a book about a strange kid who's obsessed with strange creatures. And to hear that it resonates with people, that people like it, in a weird way makes me feel much less alone in this world, and like we're all connected in ways that I wouldn't have necessarily thought. And I know, like, it's not necessarily a book for everyone. I've talked to some people who just can't bring themselves to like Susie no matter what, and that's okay too. But to know that so many people do is really, I don't know, it just makes me feel a little less alone and more like, oh, we all have this inside of ourselves. Because I guess I just thought the stuff that came out was just me. So it makes me feel much more connected to people, and that's the really cool part.
Yeah, okay. And then the last thing is, what advice would you give to any young writers listening today? Because I think there's probably a lot of aspiring writers out there.
Okay. Don't do what I did. Don't assume that being a writer is like being a wizard in Harry Potter, and you're going to find out because somebody's going to send an owl to your house with an engraved, because that's not going to happen. And I never thought that I just never thought that that was even a possibility. And it turns out it is. And so what I would say is write, and there will be people who discourage you, who will say things like, oh, yeah, but it's so hard to be a writer. Like, nobody succeeds at being a writer. And write anyway, and write often and write soon. And remember that the first piece of criticism I ever got on my writing, really, like in the adult world, was that those 2 words from the president of that company. So like also don't get discouraged and listen to feedback, but also don't listen to it. And just whatever you do, keep writing. And because if I can do it, you really can do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing. And I want to thank your publisher, and I also want to thank KCLS Foundation for supporting You Choose the Next Newbery, and also to all the students who are listening now and sending questions. And if you'd like to watch this later, it's going to be available on KCLS YouTube. So tell all of your friends and your family. You can all rewatch it. And again, thank you to everybody, and have a great day. This is wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.